They're calling it the Acropolis of the Sea, a remarkable piece of ancient history deep in the Mediterranean. For more than 2,500 years, the shipwreck has thought to be lost to mankind. But a chance discovery has meant it's now open to tourists as an underwater museum.
In May of 2024, archaeologists pulled something off the floor of the Mediterranean that they will not name. Not a statue, not a tool, not anything they have ever seen before.
That ancient Greek computer thing, what is that called?
The Antikythera mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, that testifies to a lost navigational skill.
In their public statements, they call it only an object requiring further analysis to determine function and significance. The site is the Antikythera Shipwreck, the same wreck that gave the world its first computer 2,000 years before computers were supposed to exist. And whatever they brought up this time, the people holding it in laboratories in Athens and Geneva right now cannot explain it. The nameless object. Look, the truth is, in archaeology, that phrase is not neutral. Specialists know how to identify a statue. They know how to identify an amphora, a coin, a fragment of bronze armor. When a research team declines to put an object in a category and instead reaches for the words requiring further analysis to determine function and significance, they are saying something specific without saying it out loud. They are saying it does not fit. They are saying it is hard to explain.
And because it's exciting. So the wreck is known as the Antikythera wreck, and that's because if you look at a map, this ship went down in the 1st century BC just off this tiny Greek island in the Mediterranean called Antikythera.
And the team saying it is not a fringe operation. It is the University of Geneva, the Hellenic Ministry of Culture, the joint Greek and Swiss expedition that ran the 2024 excavation season. These are not people who use vague language by accident. Here is the deal. The wreck has been studied for 124 years. It has produced exactly one object that nobody on Earth could explain when it first came up. That object reshaped the history of technology. And in the summer of 2024, the people working that same site brought up something else they cannot describe. Stay with me, because to see why this matters, you have to know the wreck, the floating treasury. The vessel that sank off Point Glyphadia around 60 BC was not a normal Roman cargo ship. Modern surveys put its length at 40 to 50 meters. That is enormous. That places it among the largest merchant vessels of its era, the kind of ship that demanded a full crew, serious money to build, and even more money to load. Whoever sent it on its final voyage was not some minor trader moving olive oil. The cargo proves it. The 1900 to 1901 recovery operation pulled out the Antikythera youth.
Expedition was mounted from Greece to pull up everything they could find.
A bronze of a young man, now considered one of the centerpieces of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. It pulled out the Antikythera philosopher, a marble portrait head representing some of the finest Hellenistic sculpture ever recovered. It pulled out fragments of bronze warriors, marble horses, amphorae of Rhodian and Coan types, and dozens of smaller pieces already centuries old when the ship sank. This was masterpieces. Now here is where it gets interesting. The coins recovered when Jacques Cousteau briefly visited the site in 1976 helped pin the date. The vessel sank around 60 to 65 BC. That window matters because it sits inside one of the most violent moments in late Roman history. In 86 BC, the Roman general Sulla sacked Athens. The city had backed Mithridates VI of Pontus against Rome, and Sulla's punishment was savage. Athens was looted. 5 centuries of accumulated Greek treasure were stripped from temples and homes and shipped toward Italy. Many scholars believe the Antikythera ship was carrying part of that haul. Other scholars argue it was a private collection assembled for a wealthy Roman patron, somebody with the means to acquire Greek masterpieces and a villa to put them in. The argument continues. What nobody disputes is the value. Whoever owned this cargo owned some of the most precious objects in the entire ancient Mediterranean, and one of them was a corroded lump nobody would recognize as significant for 2 more years. Divers in blood. April of 1900. A fleet of Greek sponge divers from the island of Symi were sheltering from a storm off the rocky coast of Antikythera when their captain, Dimitrios Kondos, lowered one of his men to the seabed to see what was down there. His name was Elias Stadiados. The depth was about 50 meters. The water was cold and dark, and at that pressure, the human nervous system starts to misfire in ways that are hard to predict. What Stadiados came back up describing was so disturbing that Kondos initially assumed his diver had been hallucinating from nitrogen narcosis. Stadiados talked about a heap of corpses on the seafloor, bodies, horses, the dead lying there in the gloom. He had not been hallucinating. What he had actually seen was a Roman-era cargo ship full of bronze and marble statues, preserved so well by the cold, deep water that they had appeared, in the panic of his first impression, as actual bodies. Imagine being the first human in 2,000 years to look at that. Kondos went down himself. Then he made the decision that would launch the world's first major underwater archaeological excavation. For the next 2 years, his men worked the wreck in heavy brass helmets fed by air pumps from the surface. The technology let them stay down for extended periods. The technology also killed them. At depth, nitrogen dissolves into the bloodstream under pressure. Come up too fast, and the gas comes out of solution as bubbles inside your veins. The bubbles block circulation. They cause crippling joint pain, paralysis, and death. The sponge divers of 1,900 had no understanding of decompression theory. None. 1 diver died. 2 more were permanently paralyzed. Kondos kept the operation going as long as he could, but the human cost became something he could not absorb. He called it off. There were still artifacts on the seabed, he knew it. But he was not going to kill another one of his men for a Greek statue. The wreck won. The wreck would keep what it still had. And here is the thing. The most important object the wreck would ever surrender had already come up. They just did not know it yet. The lump in the crate. May of 1902. A Greek archaeologist named Valerios Stais was working through the artifacts pulled from the Antikythera dives, the material now stored in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. The statues were already getting attention. The amphorae had been catalogued, but there was a corroded mass of bronze sitting in a crate, more or less ignored since the recovery. Stais picked it up. He turned it over. He looked closer. There were gears inside it. Think about that for a second. He was holding a machine, a precision machine, built somewhere in the ancient Greek world, recovered from a 60 BC shipwreck, sitting in a museum storeroom in Athens in 1902. Stais announced what he had found. The archaeological community did not know what to do with it. The technology was too advanced. It did not fit anything known about ancient Greek capability. For decades, the object was treated as a curiosity. Interesting, strange, probably some kind of clock. Nobody could really say more. That object would later be called the Antikythera mechanism. It would be considered, for the next 122 years, the single greatest anomaly the wreck ever produced. The most sophisticated piece of mechanical technology recovered from anywhere in the ancient world. A device whose precision had no comparable equivalent in European engineering for the next 1,400 years. If you are following along, this is the moment to subscribe, because the next part is where the careful language of the modern researchers starts doing more work than they want it to. The mechanism is famous. Everybody has heard of it. What almost nobody has heard about is what came up beside it in 2024, and the wording the team chose when they had to talk about it. Hit subscribe so the algorithm does not bury this video, because once you see what is coming, the question is no longer whether the mechanism was unique. The question is whether it ever was. Impossible gears. Serious science did not arrive until the 1970s. A British physicist named Derek de Solla Price got his hands on the fragments and ran the first detailed X-ray imaging study. Price worked alone for years. The imaging revealed that the visible portions of the mechanism were a fraction of the actual machine. Inside the corroded mass were dozens of gears, precisely cut, arranged in a configuration that appeared to model the movement of celestial bodies. Price proposed it was an astronomical calculator, a device for predicting the positions of the sun, the moon, and the planets. His reconstruction was incomplete. It was also revolutionary. The real breakthrough came in 2005, when the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, led by Mike Edmonds and Tony Freeth at Cardiff University, got permission to scan the fragments using cutting-edge X-ray computed tomography. Picture Freeth in the imaging room, looking at the first reconstructed slices of an object that had been sitting in a museum for over 100 years. The scans revealed details every previous study had missed. Inscriptions on the bronze surfaces, gear teeth they had not been able to count before, a machine inside the machine. What they found was staggering. At least 30 bronze gears, tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. A gear train, implementing a sophisticated mathematical model of celestial mechanics, accurately predicting lunar and solar eclipses, the phases of the moon, and the positions of the 5 planets visible to the naked eye. One gear assembly used a pin and slot mechanism to reproduce the variable speed of the moon's orbit, a phenomenon called lunar anomaly that comes from the moon's elliptical path around Earth. That insight would not be mathematically described in Europe until Johannes Kepler in the 17th century AD. The ancient Greeks had encoded Kepler's law into bronze gears 1,700 years before Kepler was born. Freeth's 2021 paper in Scientific Reports proposed a complete reconstruction of the mechanism's front face. The reconstruction needed over 60 gears working in concert. 60. Implementing solar system models that, according to every textbook on ancient technology, were not supposed to exist. Now think about this. For 124 years, every researcher who ever worked on this object shared one assumption. The mechanism was unique, a one-off, an anomaly so isolated it might never be matched by anything else. That assumption is what the 2024 season is now putting under pressure. The walking submarine. The modern era of Antikythera archaeology started in 2012. The Return to Antikythera project, run jointly by the Hellenic Ministry of Culture and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, under the direction of underwater archaeologist Brendan Foley, brought 21st century equipment to a site that had only ever been excavated with 19th century methods. Advanced diving systems, underwater robots, precision mapping. For the first time, the wreck was systematically surveyed end to end. What Foley's team found was that the site was bigger than anyone realized. The ship had broken apart as it sank, scattering cargo across multiple locations on the seabed. Bronze and marble fragments started coming up that the original recovery had simply missed. Then in 2014, the project deployed something that changed underwater archaeology forever: the exosuit, an atmospheric diving system designed by Phil Newiton of Newitco Research, and the simplest way to describe it is a wearable submarine. A 530-pound articulated metal suit that maintains surface pressure inside while the diver works at depth. Think about what that means. The person inside the exosuit is not breathing compressed gas, not absorbing nitrogen. They are walking around on the seabed in what is essentially a personal pressure vessel. A diver in the exosuit can operate at depths of 300 meters for hours and ascend without a single decompression stop. They can use their hands, they can manipulate tools, they can do real archaeology. Not the lethal scramble of 1,900, actual careful work. For the first time, the Antikythera wreck could be treated like a land excavation site. And then 2022 happened. The team brought up a marble head, life-sized, identified as a depiction of Hercules. The same season produced something nobody had expected. Human remains, teeth and bone fragments came off the seabed, and DNA analysis was run on the skeletal material. These were real people, crew or passengers who had gone down with the ship 2,000 years ago, bodies still telling part of the story. Stadiatos, in 1900, had thought he was looking at corpses. He had been wrong about the statues. He had not, it turns out, been entirely wrong about the wreck. But 2022 was not the season that broke the story. The 2024 season, May and June of 2024, the joint Greek and Swiss research team, led by the University of Geneva and the Greek Ministry of Culture, returned to the wreck for an extended excavation season. They were running the exosuit. They had time. They had precision. They had hours on the seabed where the original divers had measured working windows in seconds before nitrogen narcosis forced them up. What they found has not been fully published. What they have publicly confirmed already redraws the map of the wreck. First, the ship was bigger than anyone realized. The structural analysis of the hull pushes the vessel into the 40 to 50 meter range, and a ship that size could carry a cargo dramatically larger than what 124 years of recovery has produced. Whatever has come up over the last century may be a fraction of what was originally on board. Second, a separate debris field has been identified at a different location away from the main wreck site. That is enormous. It means the ship broke apart as it sank in a way that scattered cargo across an area no previous excavation had even mapped, let alone explored. That second debris field has not been fully excavated. What is in it remains unknown. Third, new bronze fragments have been recovered that may belong to statues nobody knew existed. And fourth, the team brought up objects they have refused to name. In their public statements, the language is the same phrase that keeps surfacing every time a journalist tries to get them to be more specific. The objects, they say, require further analysis to determine function and significance. Here is the deal. That language is not bureaucratic caution. It is a flag. Archaeologists categorize objects for a living. The fact that this team will not categorize what they have pulled up means the objects do not match anything they recognize. And it is happening at the only wreck in human history that has ever produced a piece of technology that did not match anything anyone recognized. The unspoken question. The conversation that has been happening quietly among specialists since the 2024 season ended is the conversation the researchers will not have on the record. The mechanism's sophistication has always been an anomaly. Ancient texts describe astronomical devices in vague terms. Nothing in the surviving literature describes anything close to what Stace found in that storeroom in 1902. The mechanism appears to represent an entire technological tradition that left no other physical trace anywhere. There are explanations for that. Maybe the mechanism was a one-off, the work of a single ancient genius whose techniques died with him. Maybe similar mechanisms existed and were melted down for their bronze content, the way precious metal almost always was in the ancient world, once an object stopped being useful. Maybe similar mechanisms exist right now in museum storerooms around the Mediterranean, sitting unrecognized in crates, the way the original sat unrecognized for 2 years before Stias picked it up. Or maybe the Antikythera ship was carrying more than one. Think about the logic. A ship loaded with the most valuable artifacts of Greek civilization, statues worth fortunes, luxury goods destined for the wealthiest patrons of late Republican Rome, would not have been carrying a single sophisticated astronomical device by accident. If the mechanism was on that ship, it was there because somebody valued it, somebody knew what it was. And anybody who valued one device like that would almost certainly have valued others. The second debris field is unexplored. The main site is not fully excavated. Bronze fragments keep coming up that do not match any known artifact category, and the researchers have used the same careful phrase about them every time they have been asked, requiring further analysis to determine function and significance. They are not claiming a second mechanism. Let me be clear about that. They are saying what they have found does not yet fit a category, and they are choosing those words deliberately. One Antikythera mechanism is an anomaly. Two would be evidence of an industry, a whole industry, lost, erased. And that is the thing that is hard to explain, what the wreck still holds. The Antikythera wreck has been teaching us things we did not know for 124 years. In 1900, it taught us that ancient ships could move treasures of impossible value across dangerous waters. In 1902, it taught us that ancient craftsmen could build machines of impossible sophistication. In 2005, it taught us those machines encoded astronomical knowledge that would not be rediscovered in Europe for over 1,000 years. Every generation of technology, from helmet and hose diving to Cousteau's scuba to the exosuit, has reached aspects of the wreck the previous generation could not. The 2024 excavation is the next step in that progression. The exosuit gives the researchers precision nobody else has ever had at this site. The second debris field opens territory that has never been systematically searched. The artifacts surfacing from the seabed are filling in pieces of the picture that have been missing for over a century. What we still do not know is whether the most important discovery is already on a workbench somewhere in Athens or Geneva, waiting to be recognized. The mechanism was overlooked for 2 years. It sat in a crate while everyone else looked at the statues. Stace found it almost by accident. The objects pulled up in 2024 are still being analyzed. The ones the team will not name are still being studied. The second debris field is still mostly unexplored. Look, the truth is, the pattern keeps repeating. The statues were obvious. The mechanism was hidden. The human remains were a shock. The second debris field was unknown. Every excavation has produced something the previous one missed. The 2024 season fits the pattern. The Antikythera wreck went down 2,000 years ago, carrying a cargo we still do not fully understand. The mechanism rewrote the history of ancient technology when it surfaced. What is being pulled up now may rewrite it again. If you have made it this far, hit subscribe so you do not miss the publication when it lands. Because the moment those papers come out, the story of the ancient world is going to shift. And drop a comment with the word mechanism if you think the wreck was carrying more than one. Because if there were two of them down there, everything we have been told about what the ancient world was capable of was describing a fragment of something much bigger. The ship has been giving up its secrets for 124 years. It is not finished.